Councilman Donovan Richards, welcome to Cocktails and Convo. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here on this show, which I've been hearing a whole lot about.
Listen, I know you super
tune in a
busy.
little bit.
Super busy, but definitely appreciate you taking time out of your day. Listen, and this is Cocktails and Convo, so before we get into our dialogue, it's only right that we do a virtual toast in this sense. So look, I got me a peaches and cream. I don't know what you got over there, but
I got a little gin and juice.
Okay, that works for me. Shout out to Snoop Dogg. Let us toast, of course, to your recent victory, to brotherhood, and the ability, wisdom, and knowledge to continue supporting the people of Queens. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, brother.
So yes, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for you. Been watching you move and shake around these Queens streets for a long time now. And you've repped Queens South pretty much your whole life, right?
Well, this is now my almost 18th year at the city council. So I've lived in Southeast Queens my entire life,
Wow.
Born and bred to teenage parents, and had the unfortunate demise of a close friend of mine at 19 years old, which led me to the city council. So this is now my 7th year as a city council member, but actually my 18th year in the city council, my commitment to my friend after he died, certainly from gun violence.
Wow, well, you know, that's tough, and I'm sorry that happened, which of course is the story of so many people. So many young people know somebody that went through some traumatic experience such as that, but you made it through and you're setting an example for people to follow, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you, brother.
So, you know, you've been serving as the councilman for several years now, and pretty soon you're about to make this big transition to Queensborough president. How are you feeling about that?
Oh, it's surreal, man. You know, we come from the neighborhood, and there weren't a lot of examples of young men that I could look up to who moved up to higher office coming up, right? You know, all of us grew up in the neighborhood. We had our friends get in a little trouble. Some of us made it, some of us didn't, some of us got locked up.
Right.
So to now be ascending to this office at 37 years old, it feels so surreal. There's still a whole lot of work to be done.
Absolutely.
That's been my honest answer to everyone as I've talked about transitioning. As you look at the struggles in our community, it's sort of hard to celebrate during this moment when there's so many people in pain.
Right. Well, absolutely. And that's a very humble response, and I respect that response. But you definitely got to smell the roses while you're here.
Yeah.
So big congratulations from me.
Thank you.
You know, and speaking about that work, one of your recent Twitter posts, you stated, and I'm going to the Twitter post only because you brought it up about even how you got into politics, right? You stated, yes, we passed a law to prevent officers from choking us to death. That's not anti-police. In fact, it's necessary to keep that thing called oxygen flowing. I can't breathe.
Now, I went to court every day pretty much with the Garner family during their trial, the disciplinary trial. And I chaired a public safety committee at the city council, so it gives me oversight over the New York City Police Department, which is a big job. I mean, if you would have told me we would have seen this amount of transformational change happening over such a short course of time, I would have said, you're lying. But we banned the chokehold belt, the chokehold.
Right.
And we made it a crime, technically, just to choke somebody to death. And
Well,
I didn't
it
even
should
understand
be a
why we
crime.
needed to. It's a crime. Yeah, you can be arrested for it. So Melinda Katz, actually, there was a young man choked on the boardwalk just a few weeks ago, about a month ago,
Right.
where the law that we passed actually enacted, where Melinda Katz actually did charge an officer for choking someone on the Rockaway boardwalk, literally like a week after we passed the bill. So in a perfect world, we wouldn't need to pass a bill, but when you look at George Floyd, when you look at Eric Garner, everybody points to George Floyd. We had it happen here, but you heard the police department condemning the actions
Right.
of what happened to George Floyd, but wouldn't necessarily condemn what happened right here on city streets, and took many years, nearly 6 years, to fire this officer who choked Eric Garner to death. And he faced no jail time, obviously, for murdering Eric Garner. So,
Murder.
yes, we're not anti-police. We support our police. We have some good officers. I have
Absolutely.
Detective Dutanian in the 113th precinct. I just had Kevin Campbell retire out of the 101. We've had a lot of great relationships. Officer Cooper out of the 105, who we work with, who look like us, who understood the community as well. So we support those officers, but we in no circumstances support the officers who don't practice CPR and who are killing unarmed Black people out on these streets. And Sean Bell was my neighbor. Just to add to that, Nicole Bell lived across the street from me in Far Rockaway when I lived out there at one point. So I got to know the family, work with the family very closely. I know his daughters, you know, and so those are the things that I'm reminded of being in this chair that I'm in right now, and why we have to hold the police department accountable, but also support them at the same time when they're doing the right thing.
Absolutely. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned the names of some good police officers, because I do agree that they're absolutely good police officers. And I mentioned on last episode that I know some good police officers as well, but I also admitted the unfortunate reality that, like, I'm afraid. Like, I'm afraid when I hear sirens. Like, I'm absolutely afraid. So, and I don't want to be afraid anymore. So, to those good cops out there, help me not be afraid. Help people who look like me, who look like you, and who look like those good police officers to not be afraid. And that's just going to take a lot more collaboration. And we could talk about that all day, right? All day. As I previously mentioned, you've been serving for years and just pouring in to community. What would you say has been your greatest achievement thus far?
I would say definitely when you look at the plight of the folks who lived in Far Rockaway for a long time, just decades upon decades of systematic racism, a lack of economic opportunities that came to residents down there. And what really led to Far Rockaway having a reputation it has, right? You know, everybody, when they think of Far Rockaway, has always thought about shootings and murders. There's always this negative connotation.
As soon as you hear it, The Rock, whoa.
Far Rock, you know, and but when I last week I got to go down to Thriftway Mall, and for those of you who don't know what Thriftway Mall is, it's really our commercial central place in Far Rockaway, where you would in an average place be able to go and shop and to have a cup of coffee. And you had this site downtown Far Rockaway, which was blighted for 40 years, which basically told you that the government did not care about you. It led to a lot of the violence we've seen. It spelled out lack of opportunity for the community. And to now see that site is moving forward, and that was a commitment I made when I got elected to the constituents, when I knocked on their doors. I said, we're going to get this done. To now be building a $40 million state-of-the-art library, to be bringing in 1,700 units of real affordable housing. You know, everybody, when you hear affordable housing, they're like, oh, this is gentrification. But these units are going to families who are in our homeless system, up to people, upwards of people earning $30,000 to $80,000 for a family of four. So you divide four into those salaries, and you really get true affordability. Some new parks, $130 million for Redfern houses for their development to become more resilient, a new park. And then not only a new park, but we decided to fix Redfern's park as well through this process, where I got $10 million there.
Let me find out you showing off now.
MS-53, a place you know very well. You know, we're doing, I believe, a hydroponic farm in there. I think we got about $2 million. So fixing a lot of the systematic issues and lack of investment in that school in a big way. And all of the remaining schools, we got about $10 million of investment there. So I would say that that's been one of my proudest accomplishments, because it's uplifting people. And I was at the site. We have over 100 young men and women from Far Rockaway working on that site right now. And I do a monthly accounting of who's working on that site. So when you talk about changing people's lives, upward mobility, giving them opportunity, fostering a community center at that site as well, it's a real opportunity for the residents. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen in about 10 years when we go back to that site, although we will break ground at the site. Next year, we will do the ground ribbon cutting for the first phase of that site. So that's one of my proudest accomplishments.
Awesome. And you should be proud of that. Affordable housing, job opportunities, and access, just to access to more, right? And you've done tremendous amount of work on that. So, and staying on that same lane, of course, you're going to be transitioning into the borough presidency soon, and your council seat will be vacant. So what would you hope or want for your successor to focus on? Maybe if it's that one area that you've been chipping away at, but you still would like to do more? What would you want your successor to focus on?
Well, continuation of the work. And I mean, from Rockaways to Laurelton to Springfield Gardens to Rosedale, we have a lot of projects that have technically been fully funded. So it's going to be important for the person who comes after me to know where we put money so that they're ensuring that all of these projects are done. I mean, we've technically secured close to $2 billion for the district over the course of the last 6 years.
We got to cheers to that. Yeah. That's funding.
And infrastructure is something that is important too. There's a lot of flooding in this neighborhood. I became the first African American to chair the Environmental Protection Committee when I came into the city council. We secured about $1.5 billion, which has now turned into $2 billion of infrastructure investment, which is going towards building out our sewer systems in Southeast Queens in the Rockaway. So we have 40 projects in the pipeline slated to continue to happen. So it's going to be important that people understand that. But more importantly, also, the person who succeeds me needs to be able to have relationships and know how to work with others, working with the agencies, knowing how to collaborate with their other colleagues, even when you don't see eye to eye. And we've sort of moved into the space in politics where there's this thing called cancel culture, and President Obama certainly distinctly talked about that earlier in the year, where it's this all or nothing approach now. And that doesn't lead to getting anything done when it comes to serving people. So we have to keep the people's, most importantly, how are we serving the people is going to be important for the next person to continue. And I'll be borough president. I'll still be around the corner, still sticking my foot into the door a little bit just to make sure all of the things we talked about continue to happen. And if there was one area, quite frankly, I would say, and just closing, healthcare is a big one. Healthcare for everywhere. We saw during COVID-19, we saw how the lack of investment into healthcare across the borough really created this big storm in our community. And we're going to need to see a lot more investment and focus in that area as we move forward to quality healthcare.
And that's a big one. Quality healthcare is absolutely essential for everyone, right? And it's a right. You shouldn't have to search for it. It should be available to you. And you also stated relationships, and you are absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. Relationships in any role, right? Whether it's in service or whatever career field you are in, those relationship pieces are essential to getting work done. Granted, you got to want to do the work. You got to be willing to roll your sleeves up. But those relationships that you form along the way and talking out those issues, whether you agree or disagree, is essential for that next person who fills your seat.
It's technically cocktails and combos, right?
Bingo.
That's what it is.
That's
and,
it.
Just touching briefly on that.
I think you just made a commercial for me.
Right, because Commissioner James O'Neill and I, former police commissioner, didn't see eye to eye on everything, but we would go out and grab a cocktail, and seriously, and be able to have a conversation around some of the most complicated issues surrounding policing, whether it was marijuana reform, marijuana justice, it's the sexual victims division in the NYPD, being able to talk these things out and to talk about our differences of opinion. But at the end of the day, we all know we wanted to arrive at the same place.
Absolutely.
We wanted a safer city. We wanted a trust between the department and our communities. And one way we achieved that was, cocktails and conversations. Hey. And we got to do more of that.
There it is. Absolutely right. That's perfect. So, of course, on another note, Queens has produced some hip hop giants. We know that. Run DMC, Nas, LL Cool J, Salt and Pepper, Black Sheep, the Lost Boys. The list goes on. Who's Donovan Richards' top 5 MCs right now?
Oh, in Queens?
Anywhere.
Oh, okay, that's easy. So I guess I'm gonna mix some old school up with some new school. So obviously Nas, Tupac. I like Joyner Lucas.
Okay.
I like some of his material. So I've been listening to him. Joey Badass. All right.
Okay, you got a mix of flavor there.
That young man has a little, he could spit some lyrics. And then Biggie. I mean, just a natural 50 Cent, all of the, it's hard. I'm trying to adjust to getting into some of the new stuff. I tried to listen to Pop Smoke album, rest in peace.
Right.
and so he it was it was all right album,
Okay.
and then Casanova, and then there's also some British artists too that I've started listening to too. I forget the young man's name, but I had a British young man who worked in my campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He lived in London,
All
and
right.
he put me on to a few artists out there. So I've been trying to get into a little bit of that as well.
There's a couple out there with some heat too. Your list isn't bad at all, but there's one person missed from that list, and I'm just feeling quite disrespected.
Oh, and you know what? Well, I didn't get to. You said top 5. If I had top 10, I would have had to put you in there.
Whoa!
Sean Rux in there, Ruxbucks all day.
No, and I wasn't even speaking about me, but I'll take that. I'll take that in the top 10.
Who am I missing? Who am I missing in that list?
The GOAT. You missing the GOAT? I gotta tell you who the GOAT is.
Wait, I said Tupac.
That's the wrong GOAT. I'm talking about Jay-Z.
Okay. Yes, Jay is definitely. He is the GOAT. He is the GOAT. You got to give it to him.
It's all right. It's all right. Listen, we're going to be right back with some more Donovan Richards, and the people want to know. Welcome back to Cocktails and Convo, and we are back with the people want to know. And of course, by now, that's when we just take random questions from everybody, and Councilman Richards is going to help me out with these questions. You ready, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All day, every day. Stay ready.
James from the Bronx wants to know if his vote in November really matters.
Absolutely. If you don't vote, then you are voting. You're voting for the other side. And, since you're from the Bronx, and I don't have to tell you this, the Bronx has, I think it's the poorest congressional district in the country, right? So you think about poverty, you look at the violence, which is certainly the root causes of violence is certainly poverty and lack of opportunity and access. So when you don't vote, you are voting. You're just voting for the other side. Absolutely. And you're also voting for other people to take the money that should go to your district. So in politics, although I don't like to say this, it is a numbers game. Your elected officials, the next mayor is going to be looking to see where do the votes come from. Even presidential candidates. And it's very important that we do this. And then just to end it, John Lewis, who passed away last week, we all watched his funeral, the Lion Congressman John Lewis, who fought for our right to vote. I mean, how could we stay home? How could we not participate when folks died for our right to vote?
Absolutely.
So let's take this seriously. Absolutely. Your vote does matter in November. Get out and vote.
And we got to get people out of that mind frame. Your vote absolutely matters. And James from the Bronx, look, I'm calling him the borough president. You heard from the borough president, your vote matters. Get out there and vote. And not just James from the Bronx, that's everybody. Everybody get out there and vote because your voice matters. We're going to move on. Paul from Brooklyn wants to know, who's going to win the exhibition match between Mike Tyson and Roy Jones? Who you got?
I got Mike Tyson. I'm sorry, I gotta go with Iron Mike. He's been through so much. It's weird. I don't even want to consider. I never could consider him an underdog in any fight.
Any fight, right?
But it's just he's been out the game, and he's gone through so many trials and tribulations. I feel like he is the underdog in this situation a little bit.
I'm not going to front. We all want Mike to win.
But Mike is still Mike.
Yeah, he is still Mike.
If I was Roy, I would be working out right now.
No disrespect to Roy Jones at all. He had a nice run, but Mike is still Mike. If somebody told me which one you need to fight, I'm picking Roy Jones to fight. But the crazy part, Roy Jones fought in 2018. Like, he had a fight. So, I mean, granted, that's 2 years ago, but Mike, 2005.
Yeah.
2005. If it lasts 2 rounds, I'm giving it to Iron Mike.
Exactly.
If it goes more than 4 rounds, they both gonna have to go to the hospital. I don't know. But you heard it. Paul from Brooklyn, borough president.
Come on, you from Brooklyn and you asking that question? I hope you going for Iron Mike. Wait, is Roy Jones from Brooklyn too?
Sorry?
I forgot. Is Roy Jones from Brooklyn?
I don't know.
I don't even know where he's from. I know Iron Mike is from Brooklyn, so I'm hoping Brooklyn is at least rooting for Brooklyn.
I don't know. I'm with Iron Mike.
Since I'm from Queens, I should go with Roy, but I'm going to go with Mike.
I'm going with Mike, too. So Natalie from Queens wants to know, What is your first order of business once you assume the office of Queensborough president?
The first order is to look at inventory. So when you talk about community boards, which really do 700 community board members in Queens, 14 community boards, and these are largely public servants. It's a volunteer position,
Right.
and they largely shape a lot of what happens in local communities. So when you talk about development, when you talk about parks, when you talk about investment, community boards also have a say-so, although it's not a binding say-so in what they can do. But agencies listen to them. I'm going to be looking at diversity. I'm going to be looking at process when it comes to community boards as well. Community boards also are a gateway to opportunity when you talk about entrance into politics, entrance into civic engagement. We want to see a lot more of our young people sitting on community boards as well. So that's going to be one of the first orders of business. But I honestly have to say, we are in a state of emergency right now. And it's just as in a post-Sandy world, I came into office right after Hurricane Sandy.
Right.
We have to stop the bleeding. So when you talk about small businesses, when you talk about ensuring that all of our hospitals have everything they need, our healthcare institutions, in the event COVID-19 comes back, we need to be ready. So there are a lot of things we need to do in the immediate to sort of stop the bleeding.
Yes.
I just got off the line with my Congressman Meeks. Happy to hear that Washington, D.C. is close to reaching an agreement on a stimulus package, which will help to aid us with some of the budget cuts that we could have faced later on in the year. Not to say that we won't see that, because we're in a $9 billion deficit in the city.
Right.
But it really is going to be my job to fight for every dollar I can get for Queens. And we're going to do that because that enables us to stay vibrant, to hold on to what we have, and to preserve affordable housing and all the other things.
You heard it, Natalie. He's getting to work. That's what he's going to do. He's going to get to work and continue to support the entire borough of Queens. Now, you spoke about the current pandemic that we're in, and it's been rough. Like we're 7+ months now that we're still dealing with this pandemic. Is there an end in sight? Like, where do we go from here? Like, there's still so many questions, so many unknowns. What would you say to the people right now?
Well, personal responsibility is important. Let's start there. Wear your mask,
Right.
Social distance when you can. Very important. You know, I think I saw the numbers today. We were something at like 1%. We dropped down to of cases, which is phenomenal. That shows that by following the rules, we are making some progress. But it is summer. There are people slipping up. I did see last night that there was a boat party, a party on the boat with over 140 people on it with no social distancing and masks on. And that's selfish, because when you think about all that our essential workers have endured, how many of them passed away even during COVID-19. God rest a young lady by the name of Priscilla, who worked at Elmhurst Hospital, who was a good friend of mine, who passed away. So we all have to take that personal responsibility. And then, I'm hoping, and I have very little faith in the Trump administration, but there is a vaccine coming down the line as well. We'll have a lot of questions about access when we talk about that vaccine, and obviously quality and does it work. But those are the ways we will finally get out the woods. Without a vaccine, no, you are never totally out of the woods. I will also say that everyone should get tested. We fought very hard to make sure Queens got more testing sites, especially the communities hit hardest, like the Rockaways, Southeast Queens. Right. And yet the testing numbers are still not as good as they should be. So folks should make sure they do that as well. And also fill out your census, because that determines a lot of federal money that will come down the pipeline to the states. And if you don't fill out your census, that means that monies that could go to our hospitals, monies that can go into our education system, into our roads, into affordable housing, we won't get here in New York State, especially New York City, where we have a large population. We will miss out on a lot of investment if you don't do that. So there's a direct correlation between poverty and COVID-19 and low-wage workers and access and healthcare quality. And we have to make sure that the monies are being put in place in these communities. And that's going to be largely my job, to be the cheerleader of the borough, but to also be the defender of this borough as well at every instance.
Great. Awesome. I mean, 140 people on that boat, going home to 140 different families. That's something to think about. We all
Yep.
have loved ones out there that we want them to be healthy and safe, but we got to take those precautions. So that's tough. That was tough to hear. So, but I know that we're working, and hopefully
Yep.
we will get a vaccine soon. I mean,
Yep.
I pray on it every night. And just to be totally transparent, I can't trust anything that comes out of the Trump administration at all. But I do believe that there are still good people out there working on behalf of the people. As a councilman, you've been providing support to schools all across District 31 for years, including myself when I served as a principal in Rockaway. And I just want to know, what advice do you have to families out there who are still struggling with the unknown of what fall is going to look like for their children, and which is still a real concern. And if you think about it, it's really right around the corner when we're expected to go back to school.
Happy to be a big supporter of schools, especially our public schools.
Right.
I mean, when you look at education and how that could change someone's life, we know that historically a lot of our schools have not seen the investment. I pumped in close to $50 million into our local schools over the course of the last 7 years. And that's just my district, right? So projects in every school, I'm very proud of that record. And in this last budget, I think I did something like close to $4 or $5 million that went into our local schools as well. We're going to continue to do that. And this gets back to the question you're talking about. Do you send your children to school? Do you not? And, the hard part about this, and I'm struggling with this, even as an elected official, because I have a 4-year-old who now will enter public school come September. And we did his orientation Saturday, and I was just like astounded at how much the principal was trying to put the pieces together, and the administrators were and the teachers were, but just how much misinformation was out there, but how little clarity was also out there, how the conversation around access in schools opening keeps changing day to day. Yeah. So I would urge every parent out there, one, you have a right to make a decision for what's best for your child. If you want to just opt out and do remote learning, you have that right to do it. I know many of our school communities are looking at the different hybrid models that the Department of Education is offering. So for instance, the possibility of doing 3 days in person, 2 days and doing 2 days remote. Those are conversations that I think school communities should make collectively. Make sure the surveys that they send home, each school is sending home surveys to parents. Make sure you fill that out, right? Because that's going to give them a good synopsis of what days and what strategy they should use when it comes to school opening. But there's still a lot of unknowns. You talk about cleaning, and we have some good custodial staff in a lot of our schools, but how frequently that cleaning is happening. So there's still a lot of questions around health and jeopardizing safety with reopening the school system. And it's also important to look at what's happening around the world in other parts of the country. We've seen some other parts of the country open up, and we've seen cases emerge. And I think there was one county that opened up all schools, and the first day they had to close down because they had cases spread.
Indiana,
very fast. I think it was in Florida. Was that Florida? I don't remember.
I'm thinking
if that
Indiana,
was Florida.
I believe.
Indiana, right. So there's no right answer or wrong answer right now. We have to follow the facts.
Right.
And, so we'll be watching closely. The governor really has the final say so on this. So I would continue to just listen, observe, and watch carefully, because I think the decision will come down much later than what we anticipate.
Right. And I'll say this, I know that there are so many people spinning their wheels to try to make the right decision for what should happen in the fall. I'm not taking anything away from those people who have to make those difficult decisions. But as a parent first, as long as there's unknown factors out there, my kid will be home. And I'm just speaking for me and my family, and I'm working with the system to try to come up with those answers as well. But as long as that unknown exists, we got to take care of our own first.
Right. And talk about it goes back to systematic challenges again, right? The schools with the most overcrowding, right? How do you balance all of this? And we know historically those schools are in our communities, right? The schools the kids who weren't getting the technologies up front as fast as they needed to get it. Those kids were in our communities because they don't have access. And I'm watching how other communities are coming up with this, I think it's called pods, where they pool their money together to do collective schooling, themselves. And they're doing that. And they're coming up, I think I read in the New York Times yesterday, with $25,000 to do these things. And our kids and communities are not going to have that opportunity to do it because of the socioeconomic status in a lot of the communities we represent. And
that's an interesting point you make, though, because even think about it. And granted, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I know that the funding per student travels with the student. Like if I go to one school and I transfer to another school, that funding follows me to the other school. What if groups of parents in some of our, less fluent communities got together and they had the expertise to teach their children and provide them with a quality education, that those funds followed them so that they could properly support the teaching and learning for those children? Something to think about. I'm going to give you the closing word. What do you got to say to the people?
Well, this has been a trying time for all of us, and I know mental health and all of the things that we don't talk about are impacting many of our communities. But what I want to say is stay hopeful. I know it's hard. I know we all is trying to figure out how to pay next month's rent. For small business owners, they're trying to figure out how their businesses are going to survive. Many of our children are coping with this as well, and they need help and need services as well. They're hurting just as much as us, even though they can't communicate it as much. But I'm going to say keep hope alive. We have a lot of work to do. Trust that we are working day in and day out to make sure that we can make this whole COVID-19 situation better for us. So brighter days are ahead, and it's going to be painful. We're going to feel a lot of pain in these days. But together, the stronger we are together, the more we social distance, the more we fill out our senses, the more you hold us accountable, the better the days ahead will be. So even through these complicated times, there will be opportunity on the other side. And think about it. Think about all of the conversations around equity that weren't happening in this country for a long time. Think of all the Black Lives Matter marches that are happening around this country and around this city, all over, from people who don't even look, who aren't even Black, who are out there marching with us and for us and standing up on the side of justice and righteousness. That's what gives me hope moving ahead, that this next generation is going to get it much better than what our generation got it as. But we all have an obligation to be a part of it, to fight, to raise our voices, to educate ourselves, to be good neighbors, to look out for our neighbors. And when we do that, this will be a much better country, when it's a country that everybody feels equal, and where equality is more than just a slogan, but actually something that this country abides by. So a lot more work to be done. And I look forward to coming back on this show as borough president and enjoy a cocktail.
I'm calling it now. You heard it from the borough president, words of wisdom. And I truly believe that through chaos, excellence will emerge. I thank you for your continued work, your continued service to the borough of Queens. I wish you the best of luck on all your future endeavors. Thank you for joining us on Cocktails and Combo. Ladies and gentlemen, Borough President Donovan Richards.
Thank you, brother.